Let's move in to the NFC West. We have the Arizona Cardinals. You have them at 8-9. I have them at 7-10. I think this is a team that we are probably a little bit higher on than a lot of people. I am a little bit concerned with their pass rush because, okay, this isn't the pass rush, but Zay Jones was suspended for 5 games. And then I believe Ojulari tore his ACL or something like that. So he's going to be out for the year. And I believe there was another injury to the D line. I think Darius Robinson is a little injured right now. I don't think it's all year, but it's something to monitor. Now, I do think that the biggest strength of the Cardinals is going to be their offense and their skill positions. I don't think their offensive line is the worst thing in the world. I think their tackle situation is shored up right now. Trey McBride, Marvin Harrison Jr., Michael Wilson, Greg Dortch, Zay Jones when he comes back, Zach Pascal. You have James Conner, who's been productive for them. You have Trey Benson. Like, this offense is not bad. It is not a bad unit. Now, they may sell on defense, but when you look at their secondary, they have Sean Murphy-Bunting, they have Budda Baker, they have Max Melton, who they spent an early draft pick on, who you hope can be there.
Our
Dennis
guy.
Gardeck, like, that's what I'm saying. Like, this team is not bad. I don't like their D-line really at all. Their linebacker situation is But overall, this team is starting to take form of the Monty Ossenfort vision, and I have really loved what he's done there. I think that the Cardinals are going to be, they were a feisty team last year. Like, when's the last time you could say that the Cardinals were a feisty team? Even with Cliff, yeah, they would win. They were talented, but they weren't feisty. They didn't feel like they wanted it. The Cardinals felt like they wanted it, and I have not seen a brighter future for the Cardinals in a long, long, long time.
You were spitting right there. No, and I know Cardinals fans are going to feel that because that was really the best way you could say that. Truthfully, I never even thought of it like that. But when they were way more talented, they didn't have that fucking fire in their gut.
They
Hunter.
didn't have the fire in their gut.
Did
they take the bus?
Did
they take the bus?
They weren't taking the bus. They had no fire in their gut. Look, and that's why I want to say what I want to kind of round into too is what you were saying. Look, this is the biggest thing for the Cardinals. Is yeah, I agree with you that this defense on paper, and Gannon would agree, realistically needs about 2 or 3 more years of draft capital into it to kind of round out his vision, I'm sure. But with that being said, you look at it and you say, okay, with what he did last year and the guys that have developed now and you have added, I think you can say to yourself, you know what? Gannon can do enough with this defense to have them be a middling out unit. And I would say that's what you'd expect if you're a Cardinals fan. Somewhere from 14th to 22nd, right? Let's say like that's a good range to have them in. But if you can do that with a productive offense, I think you can finish somewhere around right 7-10, 8-9, how I had them, and where you had them. And that's the thing is, I don't think they're a playoff team this year. I think despite their best efforts, even if they had, which again, I like you had them kind of ceilinging, however you want to say that out. I still don't think that they're a playoff team because of how tough the landscape of the division is right now. But the bottom line is, look, like we were saying earlier about a few other teams, you finally, like the Panthers, namely, yeah, the immediate future is not the brightest thing, but you definitely can sit there and say, look, this team has a vision. They are attacking it. They are putting together a roster and putting together a window in the future. And as a fan base, again, that's always all you can ask for, because we look at a lot of teams every year that it's like a great quote from I don't remember exactly who it was. Who was it? Denzel Washington, where he said, just because you're moving, don't mistake movement for progress, because you can run in place. There's a lot of teams that run in place every year, and we mistake it for movement. I think you can see here and you look at the Cardinals and you say, yeah, they're moving though, but they're moving in the right direction. And granted, it might be slow. Granted, it might be a slow jog right now, but you see the direction. And to put the cherry on top of my whole spiel, I think I want to add that people forget that Kyler Murray is an MVP caliber quarterback when he's healthy. Like when Kyler in the Cliff offense, I want to add where back to the Cliff offense that would look really good, but
stagger, yeah,
and really stagnate. Like Kyler was still holding that offense together by a thread. So you give Kyler an evolved offense, you give Kyler evolved playmakers, one of the best tight ends in the league, hopefully one of already the better X receivers, literally from even his rookie year. I mean, realistically, Hunter, this Cardinals team can really surprise a lot of people this year.
I agree. I am optimistic about the Cardinals and actually really excited to see what they build. Let's move in to the Los Angeles Rams. You have them at 9-8. I have them at 10-7 as a playoff team. I am so high on the Rams this year. I think last year, what they did with the team, with a roster that we've been saying this kind of the last couple years with the Rams, like, oh, I don't know. And they've always outperformed. And now they have a roster. They have Cooper Kupp. They have Puka Nacua. They have DeMarcus Robinson. And then you have Jordan Whittingham, who is lighting it up in the preseason. Not going to say this year's Puka, but, obviously they lose Alaric Jackson to a 2-game suspension, but I do think their offensive line is pretty decent. Their D-line is going to be very, very scary in a year or two. Brandon Fisk, Byron Young, Kobe Turner, they have Jared Verse. Like, this team, man, this secondary, Cameron Curl, Tre'Davious White, Cam Kitchens, like Darius Williams, they have this team is one of my dark horse Super Bowl teams. I think they can come out of the NFC and win the Super Bowl. I am that confident in the Rams this year. I love what they did in the offseason.
No, you know what? Because I got to say this off the bat. The Rams are one of those teams where, you got to address it. Look, Rams fans, somehow through my simulation, you ended up 9-8 and you ended up not making the playoffs. And meanwhile, there was other 9-8 teams that made the playoffs. I do think that the Rams 100% can be a playoff team. Now, again, I'm a little bit less optimistic than you, Hunter, but to your point, this team still could win the Super Bowl. So Rams fans, don't be on me. I do believe you have a very, very talented roster, and I think you guys still are contenders. Now, again, you just unfortunately got the short end of the stick in my simulation because that's sometimes how it goes with these simulations. It is very hard when you're doing it and you got to make each pick, and sometimes it doesn't go the way you thought it was going to go, which is kind of how it went for me in the Rams. But let's spin it kind of the opposite of Hunter. Let's say, okay, well, if they end up just missing out this year, like what would be the reasons for that? I think you would just point to this, right? Again, look, it's kind of simple. As much as I always will have faith in staff, it's not even about staff. It's the fact that we've kind of seen that this receiving core has been dealing with a little bit of injury problems over the past couple of years. Even Puka, as talented, as amazing as he is, right? Still, it's kind of banged up here and there, and it's kind of been like a little bit of a trend. But I don't expect it to be a problem. But with Cooper Kupp, we're kind of at the point now where Cooper Kupp is Cooper Kupp going to be super healthy the whole year? The O-line situation is still really good, though. The offense is trying to, I'm not sitting here worrying about the offense. I think the main thing is when you come over and you're like, okay, look, if this defense, the defense would be the reason. I think you'd say right. If Trey White comes back and Trey White's not, because he's not the old Trey White. Right. Saying that would be a kind of a disservice to him because he never has necessarily been since, like the injuries have piled up and he's not the same Trey White as that first Trey White that we all remember, that first Pro Bowler on the Bills, that real old version of him. But if he can come back and be a solid version, right, he's still a good starting corner. But if he comes back and he's volatile, I think you start looking at this DB room and you're like, yeah, they're solid, but there's some volatility there for sure. Where, I love Cam Curl, but Cam Curl, where it was very volatile last year, where he'd have 1 week where he looked amazing, and then the next week would be really rough. Quentin Laker starting safety, and then Christian Roseboom, and you also have Ernest Jones as your starting linebackers. It's not a bad duo. Ernest Jones actually had a pretty good year last year, but Roseboom, on the other hand, shaky. And just to round it all out, the D-line, if Braden Fisk and Jared Verse have really good rookie years, this D-line is absolutely loaded. Rams fans know how I feel about Kobe Turner if they've been listening. I think Bobby Brown made a good jump last year, and now he's going to really be getting those real starting reps and really just, dominating on that, not dominating, but that, throwing around his body on that interior with all these youngins around him. Realistically, that's what I'm saying. They got the short end of the stick in the simulation.
Yeah.
But realistically, to your point, Hunter, this Rams team is still going to be ready to compete with anybody. And if they don't get the short end of the stick and they make the playoffs, they're a wild card to go be able to beat anybody any week.
Yeah, they're really one of those teams where it's like they could be the last seed in the playoffs, but it doesn't matter. Like if they make the playoffs, they can win the Super Bowl.
No, exactly. That's exactly how it is about the Rams.
Let's move in to our division winner, the San Francisco 49ers. You have them at 11-6. I have them at 12-5. I do think the 49ers probably still have the best roster in football. I will say their depth on their defensive line kind of fell off after this year or during this offseason. If I remember right, the people with the leading pressure rate from 3 in their depth from the 3rd to 7th pressure rate rusher are no longer on the team. You know, I don't love their cornerback room. Hopefully Talise Hufanga. How do you say his first name? I forgot.
No, what? How? Now you got me.
I almost called it Talise.
Talanoa. I see. I was gonna say it, and then now you got me thinking Talise. No, Talanoa Hufanga.
So another thing is Dre Greenlaw going to come back to be his old self? I don't know. So with that being said, like, I think the 49ers, if you look at their offense, still have one of the best rosters in the league, but can their defense be back to what it has been? And will Brandon Ayuk still be on this roster week 1?
Well, that realistically, it's funny that somehow that's still months later, the biggest question around the Niners. The saga has to come to an end soon. It's actually getting painful to follow.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we could agree though that we lean at this point. We lean that I don't know if we can necessarily see Ayuk in that Niners uniform likely next year. I think it's still a possibility, but I think we'd certainly lean towards that how long it's been drawn out that he probably wants to get his money elsewhere, right? And I think that that's eventually going to be the terms that we come to here. But with all that being said, let's assume Ayuk is still here, though. Let's because he is right now.
Wait, let's preface this. This was recorded on August 24th.
Yeah, let's also preface this. But let's play, devil's advocate. And let's assume Ayuk is still here, right? Well, if Ayuk is still here, on top of the fact of what we had just learned about Ricky Pearsall, right? So it looks like the reps might be a little spotty this year in terms of where and when he's getting them with what he's dealing with the injury, the shoulder injury. So, I mean, look, this roster is still absolutely stacked. I think you should be excited if you're a Niners fan about Dominic Pooney, your new starting guard, right? Like, I think you got a lot of upside there. I mean, this defense is still loaded. But to your point about Dre Greenlaw, you definitely know what to expect with Dre Greenlaw now coming back. I mean, that for a linebacker especially, that injury is going to be very hard to come back from. It just unfortunately is. And, like you said about the D-line, now you got some new faces on this D-line, right? Like there's some fresh blood where, but I don't think it's a bad, like Leonard Floyd, super experienced Super Bowl champ, been around on a lot of good defenses with a lot of experience that he can bring to this team. It's not like it's a big drop off is what I'm trying to say, but irregardless, it's fresh blood on the defense a little bit, but all in all, I mean, to wrap it up as shortly as possible, the Niners are still absolutely loaded. To me, they still have no excuse not to go win the NFC West. And I think that that's really just the bottom line is that this team is still just as ready to be competing for the Super Bowl as ever. They kind of, for what they lose, that they replace pretty well. And it's like that's kind of been the theme of the Niners for a while now. Yeah, there's questions around the O-line and the new faces on the O-line as well. But I think kind of like we talked about, like this whole offseason, it's like, and with Wayne, when we had Wayne on for our Niners collab, it was like, as long as these guys can move horizontal, and they move east and west, like it'll work. And it's kind of what they've done with their O-line. So it's like, I'm not really worried about it.
I guess my thing is they got to pay Trent, and the Niners are kind of in like the worst position ever. Not like realistically, but it's almost like if you don't make the Super Bowl, it's kind of like, okay, what was the season for? Like it's just in a tough spot because you're going to have to pay Purdy, you're going to have to pay Trent, you're going to have to pay Ayuk. And it's like, this is really one of the last years, not that they can make or win a Super Bowl, but that they should be expected to win it, like before the big decisions really come. So it's going to be probably a tough season, not from a like win-loss standpoint, but more of like oh God, like there's a lot of pressure on us.
That's what I was just about to say. If we're going to talk about the one thing that actually is the biggest problem with this Niners roster, it's that you did it to yourself, unfortunately, but, and the fans, you got so close so many times that there's innately it's in the back of your head, right? Like, we got to get it done. But unfortunately, for a lot of human beings, we don't get to see it.
Our teams don't get to go that far.
Yeah, exactly. It puts the opposite effect in, right? The more that you focus on the end goal, the less likely you are to really. It's about the process. So that's really the main thing is if the Niners stay locked in on the process this year and they treat it like they've never even been to the Super Bowl and just like every other, right? It's just another year. this Niners team is as talented as anybody, and they can go do anything that they want to do. But if they lock in that bug in the back of their head, especially Shanny, we got it. We got to get it done. If you put that pressure on yourself, it's almost a death sentence. Just 1 week at a time, the Niners can do anything. But if they play with pressure, I think we're going to see a rattled Niners team, especially come later in those playoffs. It's just about staying locked in, tunnel vision this year.
Last team of our record predictions, we have the Seattle Seahawks at 7-10, and I had them at 8-9, both missing the playoffs. I do like the floor of this team. I think the floor is honestly 7 wins. I think they have enough talent. I do like the Connor Williams signing. I'm still a little bit concerned about the other, Laken Tomlinson, Anthony Bradford. I do like the offensive skill position still. And I've heard Byron Murphy has been tearing it up at practice and in the preseason. So I'm optimistic about what this team can be, but it does feel like at some point within the next year or two, they're going to have to pivot from the quarterback position. And this year does feel like a year of we need to figure out what we have before we make any drastic moves. And I think that's what Mike Macdonald is doing. And I think that's why they let a lot of people walk in free agency.
100%. And, I think I'll even throw the Seahawks into this, I'm sorry I got to do this to you guys, Seahawks fans, but I respect that you guys are always riding for your squad every year and you guys are never willing to take any disrespect and that you think you guys are Super Bowl contenders every year. I really respect it. I do. But again, this is one of those ones where I can already see the comments. Seahawks fans are saying, "What are you talking about? We were right there last year competing. And not that much has changed. And we brought in a really young or good head coach with a lot of upside who just had the Ravens looking like an amazing unit on defense. How could we possibly have a regression to the point where we're starting to question what we're going to do going forward?" But that's kind of the point. Is I think too many Seahawks fans are like, I'm trying to think of the nicest way to say this, but all right, I'm just going to say it from my point of view. There's no nice way to say it. Kind of locked in on this fantasy land that Geno Smith is for sure the long-term guy, and you're going to build a Super Bowl caliber roster around Geno Smith. Now, let me be clear. Is it in the realm of possibility? Sure. Is it possible? Sure. But back to likeliness. And if I was the one making the decisions, would I want to be putting my eggs in that basket? Personally, no. So I think that you're evaluating it from the perspective of, like you just said, Hunter, we got to make changes somewhere. And this year we got to really figure out where those changes are to be made. And this is a real evaluation year from the terms of how Mike is going to want to build this team going forward. You really are evaluating who's here for the long haul. Who are we letting go of? Who are we not giving money to? Who needs money? This year's you're kind of putting together for the future, because back to just my bottom line is, do you think that Geno is the future of this team, Hunter?
I am optimistic, though, about their offense because of Grubb at Washington. I think he worked really well when he was with Penix. He was with Odunze, McMillan, and Polk. And I do think, I'm not saying the receivers exactly represent what those guys were, but when you look at it from a skill position standpoint, he's working with a lot, and he had a really good offense. So I do think that this offense will probably be pretty decent. I just think this is more going to be one of those years where it's it might take a couple of weeks for this team to get going, and by that point, 9-8 is going to look good.
No, absolutely. And I just want to finish with this too, because Seahawks fans, let me be crystal clear. I would love to be wrong about Geno Smith not being the guy. And if Geno Smith could have another amazing year this year and shut me up, I would be ecstatic. I would love to see Geno Smith keep succeeding. But I'm just looking at it from the objective perspective of if you can get a better guy in the building and you have a very young roster like the Seahawks have, it has to be in the considerations. And that as far as Geno is concerned, is the bottom line.
I agree. Well, this has been our record predictions for the 2024 NFL season. Thank you guys so much for watching. By the time this video airs, I would imagine the season is probably starting with the way I have the video scheduled. So thank you guys so much for watching. As always, if you don't know ball, want to know ball, be sure to subscribe. Luckily, we've gotten some access to some pretty cool statistical information, something that we haven't had in prior, seasons. So we're hoping to really be able to level up the show this year. And thank you guys, everyone who's been supported watching, and we're looking forward to a great 2024.